Hello, my name is Farmaz Amiri and I'm the course leader for computer games design at the University of Wolverhampton. My aim today is to give you some information about the course, and at the end I'll be around to answer any questions you may have. Many people play games. Games are very popular, but very few people can actually design and make games, because it requires a wide range of skills. Playing games is okay, can be useful, but it's not enough to make somebody to design and make games. When people hear about games design, two kind of main skills they think about immediately is maths and programming. Yes, if you're good at these, it helps, but game design requires much more than just programming and maths. Partly it depends which course you would like to do and where you would like to focus, really. There are three main types of courses related to games design. There are those that focus on coding and programming specifically. These are mainly in computer science departments, part of the programming and computer science courses. There are those courses that focus on creating the artwork for games and perhaps some models for games. So they focus specifically on games art, and sometimes you see the title games art in the title of the course. And there are other courses like ours that are more generic. They cover almost all aspects of the games design, from initial idea to the finished product. And that's the type of work that we expect our students to do in our course. So for us, the most important skills for designing games, making games, are really creativity, being able to observe, imagination, sketching and drawing skills, of course, research, mainly visual research, and of course some software skills, because we make use of a variety of software in the process of designing and making games. And of course some level of coding. These days generally is a visual coding, which is necessary to kind of make things interactive. So there are different stages in designing and making a game. They normally start with research. You don't start by sitting at a desk and kind of making the game without having done your research, without generating your ideas, without sketching and kind of drawing the concepts that you are thinking about. And of course then you try to model the assets that you would like to have in your game. It could be 2D, 3D. Then you do some texturing and coloring, and you may need, and you definitely need, some sound, maybe dialogues for your games. You would record them, or you have them recorded for you, depending on how you work. And of course, once you have these assets, you bring them together in an environment within a game engine to put everything together, and then you use code to add interactivity to your game. You test to make sure everything works, and then of course you document your game. So there are a variety of stages and skills that is required for this. Let me just show you what I'm talking about. You can see here, for instance, some idea generation here, then some research that people do, with some sketching and initial design of ideas related to their research to get some ideas about what they want to do in their games. They look at existing games. So for a good designer, they sit down and research and design the concepts for their games before they try to make it, really. And that is really important. And it covers all aspects of the game. Some coloring ideas about what sort of a mood you would like to generate, about the mechanics of your game, some of the movements and actions that your game requires. You can think of some storyboard about where your game starts, what happens next, and you can visualize them on paper or digitally these days. And then, of course, you try to fine-tune your ideas and your concepts and add as much detail as possible. And you can see again that these are some examples of the work that some of our students have done in the past. What is important is that you really need to be prepared to do your research, work on the ideas before you start making. And the time that you spend on the research, it will pay off later when you make your game. It saves you time, that's for sure. The design starts with sketches, and then as you go along, you add more detail as you go along to your let me show you there's a website specifically for those who are thinking about doing our course and doing games that explains the course in more detail. I'll show the website to you so you can have a look at it at home in your own time. This is in addition to the university's official website about the courses. The website explains the course, its philosophy. It has examples of what students get up to, some of the facilities that we have, like the motion capture facility that we have, the gaming room that students sit down and play games, and also some of the other resources. It explains the course in terms of what is generally covered in different levels, different years, year 1, year 2, and year 3. Year 1 is generic. It brings all the students together to a certain level of skills. It introduces you the basics of kind of designing games, the game engine, the visual development, and introduction to some initial coding. Year 2 is more independent, advanced level of the skills, sound, 3D, and the processes related to games design. The final year is really where you bring all these skills, fine-tune them by putting them into practice. That is, by actually making games. And in some of the modules and your final major project, you actually make games that are playable. Yes, they're not large games, but there are games that somebody can sit down and actually play, and you would be doing everything for it from initial ideas to the finished product. The other thing that we do is, because we have students from a variety of backgrounds, not everybody has done games at college before coming to us, we advise them to prepare a bit if they're serious about doing games is to prepare for it. We ask them to read a book or two about games design, because that's fundamental, really, and also we ask them to become familiar with the basic tools, and that includes the game engine and some of the tools that we use for, especially for 3D and modeling. At the same time, we advise them to become familiar about the whole field of games design by keeping an eye on the websites, the game-specific websites, and some of the magazines, for instance, especially kind of the Edge magazine that has informative materials there. We invite them to kind of download some of the software, for instance, the game engine, and have a go at it. There are lots of good tutorials on this available online by the Unreal itself, for instance. I'll show you in a minute. Then for instance, the Unreal has its own YouTube channel full of really informative tutorials that you can have a go and become familiar with the tool. We again ask them to download the 3D software. We use 3ds Max, for instance, and if you're a student, it's free to download. And again, just to play around, get your head around the software, so you become more familiar with the tools. Again, we advise them to have a look at some of the, again, useful material on the web, on YouTube about games design. We ask them to follow some of the information about how the game design agency, for instance, works. And also, if you don't come from art and design background and they kind of, the skills are not, their drawing skills are not up to scratch, we advise them to have a go and practice, because drawing is something that you can acquire. There's a skill that you can get better at by practicing it. So in terms of application, we generally ask candidates to come and see us if possible, and also send us some samples of their work, maybe online if they can't physically come here. This is just because we would like to make sure that students make the right choice. So we want to make sure that our course is the right one for them, really. That's why. Again, a sample of work that we ask for is whatever you have, games related or otherwise, just to help us to know who you are and what skills you have. That's just to get to know you and your skills better. And the samples of work do not need to be just college-based, whatever. If you are interested and you have hobbies, we are interested in that as well. I don't know, playing music, taking photographs, drawing, doodling, anything of that sort. On this website, there are some samples of students' work, for instance, the final year work that students have done. And this could be useful in terms of giving you some ideas about what sort of work our students are capable of doing. All these projects are done by single students, for instance. They've done everything for their projects themselves, and that's why by the time they graduate, they really know how a game is put together, and they're able to kind of do all those bits of sections for their games, so to speak. So their skills are quite wide. Once they graduate, they can specialize in an area that they are more interested in. And in fact, the final major project allows the students to focus on their area of interest. For instance, if they're more interested in the environmental design, they can put more focus on that one. If they're interested in mechanics and coding, maybe their coding and mechanics is more sophisticated, or lighting or sound or whatever they're interested in. This is something that people can negotiate with their tutor. There's no demand that the games need to be 3D or 2D or specific game engine. All those are up to the student to negotiate with the tutor. The important thing is to make sure that the student can complete the task and the project, and the skills are there. Let me just bring this to a close by saying thank you for listening, and I will be around for any questions that you may have. Thank you.